Hey guys, I'm Jiro. Man, today at the NRG studio in North Hollywood, we had a really great project, which I've been made a plan like quite a few years ago. Me and CJ been friends for a long time, and then myself, I played in Richie Ramon band, and I'm like a Ramon family myself, and first thing comes up my mind is like, I gotta contact Elvis Ramon. He's like, he's like a legend. He's been also known for a while, famous Blondie's drummer. And then I thought maybe CJ and Elvis put it together. And that would be really a great gift to the Ramones fan. And I myself, been really, really great honor to play with these two legends for my solo album. And so here we are, the Elvis Ramon, Clem is here.
Hi, how's everyone doing? Yeah, it's been a great day. I think CJ and I actually worked together at a Johnny Ramone cancer benefit a few years back. I think Tommy Ramone sang, I played drums, and CJ played bass on a couple of Ramone songs. It was a few years back already, but yeah, I've known CJ for a while. Actually, we played out in Long Island with Blondie summer before last, and CJ came out to the show, and we all hung out on the bus and had a couple of drinks and had a chat, and it's great to be here today in the studio and actually record with CJ and with Daz from Black Flag and with Jiro. It's great, a lot of fun.
When was the first time you met the Ramones and actually got to perform with them?
Well, I know the Ramones from way back in the early 70s. Blondie, we used to support the Ramones, and I think one of the first gigs I did with the rest of my band, with the people in Blondie, we played at a place called Performance Studios, where the Ramones used to rehearse, and I think it was Monty Melnick, their tour manager's studio. And I think Tommy Ramone and Monty were partners, and it was a rehearsal space where we used to do sort of private gigs. And I think that was one of my first gigs with Blondie, was playing at Performance Studios with the Ramones. And also we used to rehearse with Blondie in Arturo Vega's loft on the Bowery. And Arturo, of course, was the Ramones designer, lighting director, t-shirt designer. And at the time, Dee Dee and Joey were living in the loft. And we would rehearse with Blondie up there in the daytime. And basically, we all kind of started up at the same time on the Bowery at CBGB and places like that. And so, knew the people in the Ramones for quite a while, long time.
What was your first impression when you saw the Ramones play?
My first impression was that they were kind of playing space-age roots rock and roll, really. They had the essence of, Eddie Cochran, Little Richard, and the Beatles and things like that, but they formulated it in a different way and made it sort of modern. And, of course, it was very minimal. And, there were also the influences of other bands that I liked, like the Stooges, for instance, especially, Johnny Ramone's haircut, like an Iggy Pop haircut. And also, the Bay City Rollers, one of my favorite bands. I know Dee Dee really liked them, and I could hear the pop elements of the Ramones, not only just punk, almost bubblegum music at the same time, and it was a perfect combination of things that I liked. So I always thought the Ramones were great. They looked great, they sounded great. It was funny to watch them on stage in the early days, having the little arguments and different things would happen. And Tommy was such an intense little drummer at the time, because he wasn't really a drummer, he was a guitar player.
Did you ever think in the 70s that all the bands that you would share the stage with would become the acts that they are today, such as Talking Heads, Ramones, Patti Smith, and many others?
Yeah, I just recently saw a television play in San Francisco, and they're as great as they ever were. They're one of my favorite bands. Of course, they're the antithesis of what the Ramones were. They were coming from a whole other place with their sound, Fender guitars, very sort of tinny sounding, but very influential band. Not as commercially successful as Talking Heads or the Ramones or Blondie or Patti Smith, but a tremendously influential band to this day. It was really hard to predict what was going to happen in the future, but it did feel like there was a synergy and that there was a handful of bands that were really doing something different at the time, and who knew where it was going to go to in the future. But CBGB's was a sort of spawning ground. It was like a workshop. A lot of bands came out of there, and when you really look back, there's only a handful of bands that became really well known from it, but all those bands are seminal bands and still have something to say to this day, and influential bands. But there was no way of knowing where it was going to go. I think everyone's goal was just to make a record. You know, it kind of like goes in stages. Like even to go into the recording studio back then and to make a record was like a really big deal. So just to get to that stage, I always thought, I always wanted to see my records wind up in the cutout bins, because that's where I bought all my records, because that's where all the good records were, the ones that didn't sell. You know, so there was no way to predict what would happen in the future, and all these bands being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the Ramones being so influential. I mean, they're my generation's Beatles, the Ramones. I mean, they're probably the most influential rock and roll band in the last 30 years.
When was the first time you left the States to play a tour?
In 1977, with Blondie, we went on tour with the band Television, supporting them in the UK. We did about 25 gigs in the UK. And at the same time, the Ramones and Talking Heads were touring together in the UK as well. We crossed paths a handful of times. That was the first time Blondie left the country.
When was the first time you visited Japan?
Oh, I gotta say 1977, 78. I think we did a 6-month world tour with Blondie that took us around the world, and Japan was one of the stops.
How was your experience?
You know, it was great. We all bought a lot of great clothes. They had clothes in Japan that you couldn't get anywhere else at the time, you know, all kinds of great straight-leg jeans and shirts, and we were all a little skinnier then, so the clothes fit, because the clothes were real small. But
We were growing kids.
yeah, right. But we had a great time in Japan. You know, the fans were always really fantastic to us there.
And which city did you have the most fun in Japan?
Well, we went to Nagoya. We went to where else did we go? I mean, Tokyo obviously is like the New York City of Japan. That was great. I think I got to say in Tokyo.
How did Blondie record its first demo? Was it on a 4-track or a reel-to-reel in a nice studio, or was it a stereo studio?
The first demos we did, it was probably on an 8-track in somebody's basement in Queens. A guy called Alan Betrock, who was the editor of a magazine called New York Rocker, was kind of managing Blondie at the time, and brought us into his little studio in Queens, and we recorded 4 songs as a demo that went around to a few different people, but really we didn't really get much of a response from that demo.
How did today's session come along?
How did which session? Today's session?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I got a call from Gene Farley and representing Gio, and I think, you know, we all kind of knew each other from back in the day, and Gene and CJ being from New York, and Des from Black Flag being from New Jersey, and you know, we've crossed paths a lot of times, and I think this man here is basically the catalyst for putting all of us together today. And it was a really productive day. We got 4 tracks done, relatively short time, so 4 drum tracks. It was a great experience, a good day.
How has the music industry changed for you in 2013? Do you feel it's gotten better or worse for a musician?
There really is no music industry in a lot of ways. I hate to say it, but at the same time, you could say it's kind of like the 50s, where everything's kind of independent. You know, anybody can make a record and you know, put the record out. I mean, if you compare it to like the 50s when there were so many independent record labels, you can make that analogy that that's what it's like today. It's definitely a new world. You know, obviously with the internet, I mean, it's all going to kind of settle down, but you know, you got Spotify, you got iTunes, you got, you know, people making albums in their bedroom. You know, the thing that remains is the song, really. It's all about the song and about the t-shirt, really, today.
What do you think about today's music that mostly uses electronic drums rather than the real stuff?
Well, I'm kind of a bit of a dinosaur, you know. I'm kind of like, you know, rock and roll drummer. A good one, but, you know, I don't really know how many people are particularly interested in rock and roll drummers, except for maybe going out and playing live, you know. That's really the main business plan. Before, you made a record, you went out on tour, the tour promoted the record. Now you make a record, then the record promotes the tour, and really that's where your main source of revenue is going to come from, is touring and once again, the T-shirt, which the Ramones knew a lot about, selling merch very early on. I mean, the Ramones' early business plan is kind of like an archetype of what the music business is today for a working musician. Go out and tour, play, sell out shows, make money, sell merch, sell your product at the shows, and that was kind of an early business plan. That's sort of like the state of the art now for a rock and roll band. You got to go out there and play. You got to have great songs. You got to have a T-shirt. That's what it's all about.
Do you record using the same methods that you used in the 70s as today?
Well, we record digitally now, don't we? So we're not recording to tape anymore. As far as my process, I like to do a bit of pre-production. I like to run things down. I have it come about kind of organically. It's the nature of what I do, playing the drums. I'm not a machine. I kind of got to work out my parts. And, you got to have the spirit, the rock and roll spirit there, which is kind of what we try to put out when we're doing something like this.
Very important, human touch.
The human touch.
What was your first drum set as a kid that you begin practicing with?
I think maybe the company was Zimgar. It was probably the drums were probably made in the Orient somewhere, maybe Taiwan, maybe Japan. It was a little red sparkle kit that I used in my first high school band. I started in bands when I was about 13 years old. So I never really had I had other jobs, but I was always kind of focused on being in a band, being a musician or a working musician, and that's kind of what I feel like I've achieved.
Do you have anything you would like to say to the Japanese fans overseas?
Oh, well, the Japanese fans, thank you for all the support over the years. Hopefully we're going to come there with Blondie in 2014. We're doing our anniversary tour next year. It's a worldwide tour, so hopefully we'll see everyone next year in Japan. I know that we're going to go to that part of the world, so hopefully people will be happy to see us. It's been a while. I think we haven't been there since 2007. So all the Japanese fans, please come out and see us.
Is this the first time that you, CJ Ramon, Dez, and Jiro have all gotten together and performed on one album?
Today, first day.
Yeah, absolutely.
That this is like I would say that this is just the beginning of great friendship and
great
friendship
cool.
and
all right.
long time.
Yeah, I think we had a lot of common ground that we could all come together on in the studio, and the process was pretty easy, I think we were all kind of coming from the same rock and roll place,
What do you feel the state of rock and roll is now?
I mean, rock and roll is not very popular. I could make the analogy to jazz or big band music in the 50s when rock and roll came about. Kind of pushed away jazz, but yet at the same time there was still a fanatical following for it. Rock and roll today is not popular music. I wouldn't call rock and roll the popular culture music. Rock and roll is more like a niche music now. There's fanatic fans all over the world that love rock and roll. I love Little Richard, I love Chuck Berry, I love Eddie Cochran, I love Gene Vincent, I love the Ramones, I love Johnny Thunders and all of that, and there's plenty of people like me around the world. But you look at the pop charts or you look at what's in popular culture, what the music, the roots of that music is still in popular music, but it's overshadowed by, this sort of like prepackaged, electronic, music. I mean, it's all about the song. You can interpret a song a lot of different ways. Nowadays, most songs are interpreted through drum machines, through synthesizers, through auto-tune and things like that, but there's still some good songs out there, and there's always new artists breaking through. But rock and roll is not the most popular form of music right now. It's more like a cult niche, like I said, market, more like jazz, like modern day jazz.
Woo! How was your experience today in NRG Studios?
Great. I mean, NRG Studios is a fantastic studio. It's not too far from my home, which made it easy. And, it's a state-of-the-art facility. It's amazing. There aren't too many left like this around the world.
How do you like the West Coast compared to the East Coast?
I like the West Coast. I like the weather. I just was on tour in Cleveland and Detroit last week, and I like those cities a lot, but it was so cold and rainy, and you think, I like the seasons, but really when you're out working in it, you realize the West Coast is a little more comfortable that way. The music business seems to be kind of based on the West Coast more or less nowadays. I mean, it was always, I mean, if you're in the entertainment business, New York or LA, it's kind of like one and the same in a lot of ways. It's the same characters are going to pop up, you know. But now Nashville is popular, and of course, besides Nashville, Austin, Texas, you know.
How did you pick your name, Elvis Ramon, for the Ramones? What was the influence for that?
Well, at the time, I had just gotten off the road with a band called the Eurythmics, which is, you know, I was asked to join the Ramones either 3 or 4 times over a period of time. I was asked to join when Tommy first left, for instance. And a guy called Gary Kerfitz managed Eurythmics in the U.S., and of course he managed the Ramones most of their career. So when I was asked to join the Ramones, to play, to take Richie's place when things were falling apart there, I knew that I was going to say I had my hair combed back in sort of a quiff at the time, which I kind of didn't really feel like changing, and I also knew Johnny was a big Elvis Presley fan. So I kind of broke out that Elvis Ramon thing, sort of like roots of rock and roll Elvis with the hair, because I didn't have my hair like a Dee Dee hair. So that's kind of how it came about. It was more like a rocker type of guy, like a 50s rocker, Elvis Ramon, like a 50s roots rocker type of dude. That was kind of the idea. And everybody liked it right away, because they all liked Elvis Presley. So, you know, it made sense. Especially Johnny, as they say, he was a big Elvis Presley fan.
Can we look forward to any new Ramones material with you as the drummer?
Well, there aren't really any Ramones, are there? Unfortunately.
Well, you know, I mean, you know, down the future, you know, there's a lot of ideas coming up. So, you know, right now, you know, just unofficial. Anything in unofficial. You know, we talk about some other time. You know, just if I'm gonna be waiting to see any surprise coming up in the future, we never know.
There's a couple of bootlegs, you know, from the couple of shows I did with them. There's a few bootlegs out there.
When can we look forward to a new Blondie album?
Probably around March of 2014. It's already been recorded. As I said, we're doing a world tour next year. We're going to kick it off at South by Southwest. We're doing something on New Year's Eve in Times Square in New York. And we're actually going to have a pretty busy year next year. I have a couple other projects that I was working on that I thought I'd be able to get more into in 2014, because I kind of thought with Blondie we were going to go on a break. But as it turns out, we're probably going to be busier than ever next year. So I'll have to see how it all goes. I have like 3 or 4 other projects that I've been working on over the last year or so.
That means that I have to wait till 2015 when he get up.
How did Blondie achieve such a original sound? I mean, at the time, a lot of bands, they didn't have that sound that Blondie captured, and were so influential. And I mean, all the bands now, you could hear some of Blondie in them. The alternative bands on K-Rock and the alternative stations, they all have that Blondie drum beat and the sound. How did Blondie kind of emphasize that sound and keep it original?
Well, from my point of view, my favorite drummers were sort of like a guy called Hal Blaine, who played with Phil Spector and the Wrecking Crew, and another guy called Earl Palmer, who was a friend of mine, who played on Little Richard, Eddie Cochran, and Fats Domino records and things like that. They were both very big influences on my drumming. But Blondie, we always kind of thought out of the box a little bit. Like, the Ramones were great, but they really played one style of music. Television were great, but they really also played one style of music. With Blondie, we kind of like assimilated a lot of different styles. We copied the other bands at CBGB's, like Talking Heads or Ramones or Patti Smith. We also copied dance music. We copied bubblegum music. You know, we made it all into a big sort of melting pot that became like a Blondie sound. And you know, dance music was going on simultaneously to, or I should say, disco was going on simultaneously to punk. And also, it was equally as subversive when you think about it, because it came out of gay underground clubs. Disco music wasn't a mainstream music either, but you know, it became more commercially successful. And of course, there was the backlash, punk versus disco, disco sucks, and all that. We never really subscribed to all that. We used kind of like David Bowie and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were kind of the template for us, how they were always changing and using whatever new influences popped up, they would kind of take and put it into their music. Even like the Stones did "Miss You" when dance music was happening. We didn't really put ourselves in a box. We kind of like could go anywhere, and of course, a lot of our success had to do with having a great lead singer. Really attractive. Debbie, of course, she's fabulous, and there was a lot came together. There was a lot of different elements. Maybe somebody was more influenced in dance. Maybe I was more influenced in rock. So maybe when we put the dance music and the rock music together, it came out sounding different than whether it be totally dance music or totally rock music. And we were allowed to influence a lot by music soundtracks, film soundtracks, and things like that. So there was a lot of different influences in the 6 members of the band. And everyone wrote, everyone contributed. It wasn't just one person's idea. It was really a collaboration.
What would you say would be your favorite period of music?
50s. Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent, Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley, who am I leaving out? Fats Domino, all that stuff. I mean, if I could play with anybody today, I'd love to play with either Little Richard or Chuck Berry. More so than Paul McCartney or Bruce Springsteen or something like that.
Do you feel there's going to be a sudden uprising of rock music in the future?
I have no idea. I mean, I really can't predict. Just the kids, they're all based in the digital age. People are not that interested in playing guitars and drums as much as they used to be, I think. I could be wrong, but I go out and do these club tours, and usually we're playing some little club somewhere. I have a couple of different bands. I just did a 10-city tour with a band. And all the bands that support us, there's plenty of rock and roll kids out there, And, I like to think there might be, but, you have like Jake Bugg, who's who I actually like. And, there's that band, The Stripes now. Have you heard them?
No.
Stripes with a Y from Ireland. They're a basic R&B roots rock and roll band. They're 16 years old. They're really good. So there's definitely a bit of that out there for sure. I think more so in the UK, there's more resurgence of guitar rock.
When did Blondie first come to the West Coast?
We came here in 1977, and we played the Whiskey A Go-Go for 2 weeks. The first week we played 2 shows a night for 6 nights, and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers were the opening band. And then we played another 6 nights, 2 shows a night, and we opened for the Ramones. So that was I think the Ramones, maybe second time out here, we did 6 nights at the Whiskey A Go-Go.
What was your first impression of LA?
Great place to wear a leather jacket at night, It's like the weather was really good, and it was a very different place then. It was not very... I think the whole country, there's been a Manhattanization of most of the country. Everybody's hip. I think the cover of Time magazine about a couple of years ago said, the whole world is hip. Makes me want to buy some golf clothes and walk around with, a bow tie and, Because, but at the time, everyone was still in the sort of glitter rock phase. The sort of there were bands like Angel.
Oh yeah.
There weren't very many people around that looked like us walking around in black leather jackets and sunglasses and things. It wasn't really that wasn't the modern day habit of dress in LA in the early 70s. But I liked it here. It was good. It was a rock and roll town.
What are some tour moments that you would never forget? There's just something that just really crazy happened that was unexpected.
Oh, there's too many to really even go into, When I've toured with a lot of different bands. I toured with Iggy Pop. We opened for the Rolling Stones in Detroit at the Silverdome, 70,000 people indoors, and, no sound check, and it was Iggy Pop, Santana, and the Stones, and it was basically like being in the Roman Colosseum or something, being thrown to the lions, it was insane. Touring with Iggy was really fun. Allen Ginsberg used to come and give us chants and stuff before the shows, and there's a lot of crazy stuff. The first Blondie tour in the U.S. we toured with Iggy Pop and David Bowie. We opened for them. Bowie was playing keyboards with Iggy, and there were a lot of great nights. We played in Seattle, and after the show in Seattle, there was a party, and we went to the party, myself and Chris from Blondie and another Gary from Blondie and Iggy. We all went to the show, and there was like a little punk rock band playing in somebody's living room. And we all walked in, and then all of a sudden they saw Iggy, and then we all got up and played like a whole bunch of songs in somebody's living room with Iggy singing. And, you know, I still talk about that in Seattle.
What would be Clem Burke's beer of choice? Domestic, imported?
Beer of choice. I just stopped drinking again, but actually I like Harp lager, which is really kind of, it doesn't seem to be very popular. You got all these British pubs and they don't sell Harp lager anymore.
Is there a certain type of wine that you prefer?
Yeah, I like Pinot Noir, red wine, French.
And what would be Clem Burke's food of choice?
Food of choice.
I knew he was going to start asking that.
Sushi.
Next one to you.
Sushi. Sushi's good.
How was the sushi in Japan?
It's better in LA. Sorry. Except if Udo takes you out, then it's alright.